Just an overview of like for anyone that didn't read the description, we're going to look deeply at Executive Order 14215, entitled Ensuring Accountability for All Agencies, signed by President Trump on February 18th, 2025, so very recently, about a month ago. And what the implications are, it does much more than ensure accountability for all agencies. It's an important conversation for everybody to attend, whether you're pro-Trump or anti-Trump. We all have a desire to seek truth and do that together in the FTI. So I hope we'll be seeking truth together. And Will, if you can also keep track of like muting people that are not on mute if they're making noise. I will try to have a screen up for that. If everyone can go on mute if you're not speaking, it would be helpful just so that there's no background noise.
Hello?
Yep.
Is this working?
Yes, we can hear you, William.
Hello?
Yes, I'm gonna mute him. And William, we're on a presentation, so please stay muted until the Q&A comes. So, would love for your people to share opinions transparently about what you believe the truth is after the presentation's over. So, um, whoops, I skipped that.
Hey
So,
guys.
Will, can you keep an eye on the noise levels?
Yeah, I'm onto it. Sorry.
Thank you. So the president and the attorney general, subject to the president's, so Executive Order 14215 includes the following excerpt. The president and the attorney,
Hey yo.
did you see it, Will?
Yeah, got it.
Great, thanks.
That's fucking annoying.
Yeah, it is. Um, and that was Rush in case he might
Yep,
have
got it. Got it.
So, the president and the attorney general, subject to the president's supervision and control, shall provide authoritative interpretations of law for the executive branch. Now, note while the attorney general is mentioned, they're subordinate to the president. So, really, this is saying the president alone is the sole person that has the power to interpret the law for the executive branch. So, keep that in mind when we try to unpack that in the next slide. So, the judiciary or the legal system of the country has absolutely no enforcement mechanism for laws. In fact, their sole job is to interpret the laws as aligned with the Constitution and what Congress has drawn up as laws. Only the executive branch can enforce laws because the executive branch includes military, police, marshals, everyone with power, force, guns, the ability to kill, coerce, threaten. Those are all people in the executive branch. So if the president chooses to interpret the laws different than the judiciary, what would happen? Theoretically, if the president is the only person that gets to decide how the laws are interpreted for the judiciary, well, he can just say, the judiciary interpreted it wrong. I'm going to interpret it differently for the executive branch, and I'm going to tell the executive branch to enforce my interpretation of the law. And suddenly, the entire judiciary, the judicial branch, is completely ignored, and we'll talk more about whether or not it's being ignored now later in the presentation. So that also means that he could theoretically ignore the legislative branch if things get to that point. There's no reason that he has to listen to the laws that our elected representatives are writing or have written in the past. So unfortunately, I will, I mentioned that. So first, let's look at who the Constitution says should be the interpreter of the law, because this is in the Constitution. So Article 3 of the Constitution says this article vests the judicial power of the United States and in the Supreme Court and such inferior courts as Congress may establish. It grants the judiciary the authority to interpret laws and adjudicate cases arising under the Constitution. The Supremacy Clause, which is Law 6, Clause 2, says that the Constitution, federal laws made pursuant to it, and treaties are the supreme law of the land. It binds judges in every state to adhere to the Constitution, notwithstanding any laws to the contrary. So Trump is essentially saying that he and his executive branch get to enforce the laws that he wants with his interpretation of the law and completely ignore the judiciary. Now, note that Trump is asserting, okay, no, he doesn't bind himself in if you'll remember the quote I said, it says he is the sole interpreter of the laws in the executive branch. It doesn't say that he has to continue to follow the Constitution. It doesn't say that he has to follow all the existing laws. It says he gets to interpret them however he wants. And it is solely in his power and no one else's to interpret them in any way he wants, and that all the force in the country is behind his interpretation. So he's basically saying he's the sole decision maker on what the police and the armed forces and anyone with the ability to cause significant unnecessary harm. He has the sole power to direct these people to do what he wants them to do. So, would he really do that? Well, actually, he already has. So, recent events have highlighted the tensions between the executive branch and the judiciary. For example, the administration has defied court orders that raised concerns about the erosion of judicial authority and the potential for a constitutional crisis. The attack came ahead this week, or this past week, when the Trump administration ignored an order from a U.S. Judge, James Boasberg, to turn planes carrying deportees around. Trump said, and I quote, "I don't care what the judges think." Thomas Homan, who was charged with enforcing Trump's deportation agenda, said in a Fox News television interview on Monday that the Monday as the decision came under scrutiny, the next day that was what Thomas Homan said, not Trump. Sorry. The next day, Trump called for Boasberg to be impeached, calling him a radical left lunatic. Federal judges, by the way, almost never get impeached. And let's talk a little bit about what this means to say that a federal judge should be impeached for disagreeing with the administration. So the Trump administration has repeatedly suggested judges who don't agree with Trump should be impeached. For those that don't know, that basically means fired. We covered at a past event the fact that federal judges are very rarely impeached historically. And the reason for that is because they aren't meant to be partisan. They're meant to be nonpartisan. Does that mean they don't have any political alliances? Sure, they do. But in general, the idea is that judges are not supposed to be politically partisan. For months, the Trump administration has made it clear they believe they can ignore judicial orders. They said, Vice President JD Vance said, judges aren't allowed to control the executive's legitimate power. And he tweeted that on the 9th of February. Elon Musk, which is Trump's top advisor, has repeatedly called for impeaching judges and is donating to Republicans in Congress who have supported doing so. House Republicans have introduced resolutions to impeach Boberg and four other judges who have ruled against Trump. So even the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court spoke out against Trump, trying to impeach judges who disagree with him. Trump's call for impeachment prompted a rare public rebuke from John Roberts, who basically said, for more than 2 centuries, it's been established that impeachment is not an appropriate response to disagreement concerning a judicial decision. The normal appellate process exists for that purpose. So Stephen Vladek, a law professor at Georgetown University who studies the federal courts, said there was no parallel situation in American history. This is literally the first time in American history where a president has tried to impeach judges for disagreeing with them. Trump officials, he said, were trying to see what they could get away with in front of federal judges. They're testing the fences, and this is a quote, they're testing the fences in ways in which they can claim plausible deniability when congressional Republicans say you can't defy the courts. Whether you call it a crisis or not, this is certainly an unprecedented degree of resistance on the part of the executive branch to adverse court rulings. So, dictators try to so we asked the question in the preface to this conversation that dictators try to intimidate people who stand up against them. So the question is Trump doing that? Well, a French scientist was detained and searched recently. They found text messages critical of Trump on his phone. He wasn't detained for a specific reason, as far as I know, but apparently he was disallowed from entering the U.S., sent back home, and the CPB, the Customs and Border Patrol, basically said that they conveyed hatred of Trump, and I'm going to quote this, they conveyed hatred of Trump and could be qualified as terrorism. So wow, that's a big claim. So let's do a fact check on this, whether or not that was allowable for the CBP to do that. It's actually illegal for the CBP to make an assertion that someone is a terrorist for criticizing Trump or anyone in a way that doesn't create a credible threat of harm. So they violated not one, but six laws, including four amendments in the Constitution. Amendment 1, freedom of speech. Everybody's allowed safeguard and freedom of speech, including the right to criticize government officials. Labeling it as terrorism infringes on that fundamental right of free speech. Second is the Fourth Amendment, protection against unreasonable search and seizure. There was an unwarranted surveillance and investigation based solely on lawful criticism, which probably violated unreasonable search and seizure. The Fourth and 14th Amendment is due process. These amendments are about making sure people are not deprived of life, liberty, or property without due process of law. Arbitrarily labeling someone as a terrorist without evidence of a credible threat undermines due process rights. Civil Rights Act of 1964, Title VI, prohibits discrimination by government agencies receiving federal funds. Targeting individuals based on their criticism could easily be viewed as discriminatory and in violation of this act. The Inspector General Act of 1978 mandates federal agencies to prevent abuses of power. Mislabeling individuals could trigger investigations and sanctions under this act. Then we go to the Whistleblower Protection Act. But like even assuming that the person was actually pointing out a wrongdoing, federal employee, and this is about federal employees, so probably less relevant. But you see that it's not violating one, but a large number of laws. Now, um, really, what should happen in this case is the CBP agent who asserted that criticism of Trump could be terrorism should be put on trial, himself or herself. Unfortunately, it seems that no lawyer is brave enough to try them at this point, and we'll go into a little bit later why. It's very concerning to me because the rule of law is not only being upheld, but there's no resistance to the abuse of law, the violation of law, and the use of force to bolster someone who is trying to get absolute power in the wealthiest country in the world, with the biggest military spend by far over the next 10 countries. So, let me go to the next slide. So Mark F. Pomerantz, he was a former partner at Paul Weiss, and he played a significant role in the criminal investigation into Trump's personal and business finances. He was appointed as a special assistant district attorney in New York County in 2021, and his efforts contributed to investigation that ultimately led to Trump's conviction on multiple counts of falsifying business records in New York. That's why Trump's a felon, because of that investigation. So obviously Trump didn't like this, and what does Trump do when someone criticizes him? He goes after them. So he didn't just go after the individual, he went after the individual's law firm. So what he did is he signed an executive order specifically targeting the one law firm that this person used to work at. He doesn't even work there anymore. It suspended the firm's security clearances, terminated their government contracts, barred their attorneys from entering federal buildings, which includes the federal court. It cited the firm's diversity, equity, and inclusion policies, as well as involvement of former partner Mark Pomerantz in investigations leading to Trump's conviction on 34 counts of falsifying business records in New York. So the firm, wrote a letter to their employees, basically saying that if they had not capitulated to Trump, that they would have gone bankrupt because no other law firms kind of came to help them. What ended up happening was that other law firms started trying to poach their lawyers and take advantage of the situation they were in. So this is a case where, well, I won't use the analogy, but you kind of get the point, is that they were up against a rock and a hard spot, and what did they do? So, first of all, is what Trump did legal? No, and it's not legal for all the same, First Amendment, freedom of speech, Fifth Amendment, due process. Next, separation of powers. The executive branch should not be involved in situations regarding legal proceedings against the president. That raises problems around the separation of powers where the judiciary should be responsible for that. And the judiciary should be the one issuing any penalties if there was wrongdoing. So there was no due process given to this law firm. They were just punished by the president directly, circumventing the legal system entirely, which is something we should all be concerned about. I don't care if someone supports Trump. I don't care if you oppose Trump, but whether you support him or not, you should not support the actions that I'm talking about tonight. And that's what I care about, not about whether or not you support Trump. I have no problem. A lot of my friends are Trump supporters. No problem with people supporting them. But the things I'm talking about tonight are un-American. They're inappropriate, and no one should support them, in my opinion. And I would love to hear if anyone has a reason that I'm wrong after the presentation is over. The other one that this constitutes is abuse of power, using executive authority to target entities based on their lawful activities or affiliations may constitute abuse of power, undermining the rule of law and setting a concerning precedents for the use of executive powers in the future. Now, the executive order faced significant legal challenges. A federal judge temporarily blocked a similar order against the law firm Perkins Cole, uh, yeah, deeming it unconstitutional and misuse of national security justifications. Facing mounting legal pressure and public criticism, he rescinded that order. But following Weiss's commit, but Paul Weiss actually made a commitment to reform before the legal system could take handle of it. They were concerned that that basically they would not last long enough to handle the legal proceedings. So, and for anyone that hasn't worked with the legal system, it is quite slow. So, all right. So Paul Weiss, instead of challenging it, basically gave in to the president's pressure. They made four commitments. One is a financial commitment. They said they're going to give $40 million in pro bono legal services, supporting. It was around supporting people like Veterans Affairs and a couple of other areas that they've traditionally supported. So some people characterize this as supporting Trump's administration goals. Now, maybe they are the Trump administration goals, but they were also the goals of the law firm because they've been supporting those areas in the past. They also made a policy change and said they would discontinue diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives. We had a special event on diversity, equity, and inclusion, and we talked about what it is. All it is a way of preventing businesses from being sued for being discriminatory. So it really makes no sense for anyone to get rid of diversity, equity, inclusion other than the DEI has been vilified by the right for no apparent reason because everybody I know on the right actually agrees that the best person should get the job, and that's what DEI is for. But we're not going to digress on DEI tonight. We did that another night. So if you want, watch the video if you didn't get to see it. But essentially, all the people who criticize DEI actually support what DEI is. They just don't support a version of DEI that was put out there that isn't really what DEI is. So, public statement. They also made a public statement criticizing former partner Mark Pomerantz for his role in investigating Trump. And so the legal community then obviously criticized Paul Weiss for standing up against or for not standing up against Trump. And a lot of people viewed it as, capitulating under political pressure, giving in under political pressure, which potentially undermines the independence of legal representation. Now, the problem with that is, Paul Weiss's perspective is that their fellow, law firms of their stature and in their space were not supporting them. So it's a little hard. I can't really get to a clear picture of exactly who was right and who was wrong. But what I can tell you is what happened and what Trump did was, illegal under multiple areas of the law, and he has not, so far as I know, been prosecuted for that. And as a president, he was said to be immune from all executive actions, including these potentially. Although, after he gets out of office, potentially he could be tried for those things. We'll see what happens. Um, Next thing is Trump is really trying to intimidate anyone that stands up against him, and he's doing it very publicly. He told the district attorney, Pam Bondi, to identify and seek sanctions against any attorneys and law firms that file lawsuits against the administration that they deemed frivolous, unreasonable, and vexatious. Now, it's a little interesting to make that claim because that directly, by the way, results in revoking security clearances and reassessing government contracts with these firms. And very interesting because that's always true. Like, there's no reason for Trump to say that because there's something called sanctions in the legal world. And what a sanction is, when you ask for sanctions against a lawyer, it's because they had a frivolous, unreasonable, and vexatious lawsuit. Trump has been in a huge number of lawsuits in his life. He knows this. So stating this publicly, is basically like stating black is black and white is white, unless his attempt is to intimidate people from having rightful lawsuits against the administration. Because every lawyer already knows that frivolous lawsuits get sanctions. But what he's basically saying is he's going to give someone sanctions, whether it's frivolous or not. If you attack him, you're going to get sanctioned. And he's already shown that he's willing to attack people who didn't do anything wrong. Sorry, my computer is going slow. All right, um, so the directive against Pam Bondi basically has the following legal concerns. First Amendment, again, it stifles free speech. It's another problem with the separation of powers because it's the executive branch interpreting the law, which Trump said in his executive order that he was going to do. So at least he did say he was going to do it, and the question is whether or not it stands up in court, and whether the real question I would argue is whether or not the military and those with force will actually follow Trump across this bridge. And this is a bridge where you're burning the bridge behind you after you cross this bridge. So if the military allows Trump to be the sole arbiter of the law, we no longer have and I don't want note takers. I don't mind Fixer, but um, that one I'm going to get rid of. So the U.S. legal system, is supposed to have a separation of powers, and the authority to sanction attorneys is typically within the judiciary, and an executive directive seeking to impose sanctions proactively encroaches on judicial functions. Trump is not a lawyer; he's not a judge. He hasn't earned either one of those places in his life. It also has a problem. It also comes into conflict with due process, and has really a chilling effect on legal representation because now anyone that wants to represent, for example, a lawsuit against that CPB person that I said called criticism of Trump terrorism, how can that person do that when, by the way, if an attorney is sanctioned, they can lose their license to practice. So they lose their livelihood if they get sanctioned. So Trump is basically saying, I'm going to fire and punish economically anyone who creates any lawsuits preventing me from doing what I want to do. Now, this is consistent with the way Trump has acted his entire life, so this shouldn't be anything new to anyone, but it is new in terms of the scope and breadth and the level of, it was referred to as one person in the news as crossing the Rubicon, where you're basically saying you're no longer going to
Wait,
be
what?
beholden to the judiciary. Um, so that is something that no one has done before. And I would say, let me give the quote. Vanita Gupta, a former associate attorney general, stated in a memorandum that this attacks the very foundations of our legal system by threatening and intimidating litigants who aim to hold our government accountable. Additionally, nearly 2 dozen civil rights groups condemned the memo, viewing it as a threat to lawyers who challenge the administration's policies. So let me go to the next slide. So I always recommend interpreting, and hopefully that wasn't in the way. I always recommend interpreting things in a way that gives people the benefit of the doubt. So let's ask ourselves, is there any interpretation of this executive order that does not authorize Trump to completely ignore the justice system and essentially become a dictator if it's allowed to be followed through? I would argue I don't see anything in this executive order that requires the executive branch to be consistent with the judiciary and the Constitution, because there's no mention made of it other than saying to follow the laws. But it says that the sole interpretation of the laws is only in the executive branch. So there's really no one to hold Trump accountable if he says, well, this is how I interpret the law. And if the law says that coal is black and he says, no, that coal is white, that's how I interpreted it, no one can stop him. Right. And he has all the force behind him to do that. So theoretically, if Trump was agreeing with the judiciary and enforcing their actions consistently, you might be able to say, well, he really meant he's going to be consistent with the judiciary, right? A really good, like very benevolent interpretation of what Trump's executive order says. You could say, well, he really meant he was going to follow the judiciary, but he's already shown that he's not following the judiciary. So he's not following the justice system. He's, flaunting in everyone's face that he doesn't have to. And the question is whether or not the real question is not whether or not we who have disagreed with Trump for quite a while are going to say that. The question is whether or not Trump supporters will say, look, Trump, we support you, but we don't support this. And that's all I ask Trump supporters tonight is to say, look, we support you, Trump. You can support Trump, but don't support this. Don't support Trump being the sole arbiter of the law, because, trying to be the sole arbiter of the law and not be beholden to anyone is what a dictator seeks. And it seems very clear to me that that's what Trump is looking for. So let's talk about, he says that this order is about asserting control over different agencies that have acted independently of the executive branch historically. But if that were the case, any intelligent person could have easily written an executive order granting the executive branch explicit control over the historically independent agencies, but that's not what was done. Trump has actually granted himself the sole arbiter of the law for the entire country. With no checks and balances, he's basically destroyed all political checks and balances in America, and he's trying to grant himself the sole arbiter of the law. And that is a power grab unlike America has ever seen since its founding. The other examples that come to mind is when Hitler ended the Weimar Republic in 1933, when Mussolini took dictatorial power in Italy in 1922, and when Viktor Orban in Hungary in 2010. All three were big power grabs where the leader took control over the country and didn't allow the judicial system to do its work. Now, let's also check our confirmation bias. Have there ever been times where someone took over or centralized power of the judiciary and did not become a dictator? There are two examples. There's Zishan of Zheng, and he was a prominent statesman in China, and there's Frederick II of the Holy Roman Empire. Both of them took complicated legal codes, they centralized them, and they centralized power in a single place. The reason they did this is to simplify the laws so that everybody could understand them. There was a big centralization of legal interpretation, but they were aimed at simplifying the laws, not enabling the leader to be the sole interpreter of the laws. So we're going to dig in a little bit deeper to that. Um, basically, Zishan was renowned for codifying laws by inscribing them on bronze tripods. He was in the 7th century BCE. Basically, he was trying to standardize legal practices and reduce arbitrary power of local clans because there was too much power in the local governments and not enough consistency in the law. And he really wanted to create fairness and transparency in governance. He empowered citizenry with knowledge of legal standards and reduced the potential for arbitrary interpretations by officials. So probably reduced a lot of graft as well. Emperor Frederick II basically created the Constitutions of Melfi, which was a comprehensive legal code in the Kingdom of Sicily. The Constitution centralized authority, but basically, in both of these cases, the leaders initiated significant legal reforms, centralized aspects of the governance, but they did not monopolize legal interpretation. I cannot find any historical record of someone that did what Trump is trying to do now that did not become a dictator. So, I mean, that if they succeeded. So, this is unprecedented in history if Trump's intentions are good, and that should give us all an alarm bell going off in our head. So, that was that. Um, so we try to focus on practical philosophy. So what do we do if Trump is trying to be a dictator? And this is where I would say, first, let's look at what happens to the average person under a dictator, and we can look at historical examples. Adolf Hitler, when he took Germany from a democracy to a totalitarian state, he suppressed the political opposition, controlled the media, implemented policies leading to persecution and systematic extermination of millions, including Jews, political dissidents, and other marginalized groups. Paraguay, under Alfredo Stroessner, his dictatorship was marked by severe human rights violations, including kidnappings, torture, forced disappearances, and extrajudicial killings, which meant the government just killed whoever they want to if they were causing them a problem. The regime targeted political opponents and indigenous populations, leading to significant loss of life and suppression of civil liberties. in Equatorial Guinea under Francisco. I can't pronounce his last name, but he's often considered one of the most brutal leaders in African history. His regime was characterized by extreme repression, estimates suggesting that tens of thousands were killed and many more fled the country. Intellectuals perceived opponents were particular targets, leading to significant brain drain on the country's nickname as the Dachau of Africa. Uruguay, similar. Brazil, similar. I'm not going to go through all of it, but it is in the slide notes, and I'll post the slide notes. I want to have more opportunity to hear people who think that I'm wrong about why they think that I'm wrong. So, um, most importantly, what I think we need, and I've said this before, but I'll say it again, is that everybody should get behind the Constitution and that we should all follow the Constitution. And that means Trump too. And we need Trump supporters, especially, to say, look, so I support you, Trump. It's okay. But you have to keep rule of law in place. And there needs to be an outcry by all Americans, everybody, saying this is not okay. And, you can even say, look, I want to be clear, if you cross the border and continue to ignore court orders, then we're not going to support you. And he needs to know, especially that members of the military will not support him if he doesn't follow what the courts say. He actually part of what he did in the for people who saw the budget that passed, Schumer agreed to pass it. Part of what Trump was threatening to do was to shut down the government so long that the courts would no longer function. And if the courts weren't functioning, then there would be no one to tell Trump not to do what he was doing. So actually, he would be able to defy the courts without defying the courts because there would be no courts because they didn't have any funding. And so, for people who hate Chuck Schumer's guts, think of that as the alternative. I would have done what Chuck did too, if that's actually the right story, which is what I learned when I researched it. So, in the midterm elections, I think we should be voting out people who are not warning Trump that this is past the line, like this is too much. Business people should tell anyone who gives in to Trump or supports Trump until this is remedied that they will lose their business and that we vote with our pocketbooks by going to non-Trump supporting competitors. I think lawyers should take up the lawsuits, defend the rule of law, and prosecute those who are abusing their power, including Trump, although you can't sue a sitting president, but once he gets out of office, but the people around him, J.D. Vance had some of those quotes that were clearly illegal, just by a layman's interpretation. And I'm sure a lawyer would do a better job making this case. I did invite a law firm to come tonight, but I don't know if they did or not. So it was very last minute, so I doubt they were able to make it. But I will mention them in a little bit. Um, if we don't quickly and immediately unite around the democratic principles the country was founded on and encourage all of those in our friend and family circles to talk about these things, a lot of people go, "Oh, I don't want to talk about politics." Well, when you don't talk about politics, bad things happen and bad ideas spread, and we all end up in a worse situation. So we have to talk about these things, but we need to do it politely. And we need to remember to stay calm and remain polite when we talk about it. We do not need to get angry. I think we need to keep our emotions in check. And again, I'll repeat for those that weren't here before, when you lose your emotions, you lose the argument. And so people are going to listen to you much more if you're calm, cool, and collected. You can share this presentation with them. What we do need to do is talk about this stuff. We need to talk about it, not ignore it. Trump wants us to ignore all of this. And if everybody ignores it, then we're in a lot of trouble if he does become a dictator. You saw what happens to the average person. So I would most importantly encourage service members of the military to remember that they swore an oath to the Constitution, not to Trump, but to the Constitution, and that they should first and foremost be loyal to the Constitution. And if Trump decides not to be loyal to the Constitution, which he's doing right now by ignoring the judicial branch, then they should be loyal to the Constitution and not Trump. And for those that don't know, let me just go back real quick. For those that don't know, when Trump was in coming out of his last presidential term, he actually tried to declare martial law. This was not widely reported, but a friend of mine found it. and he tried to declare martial law, but the military shut it down. Unfortunately, the member of the military that was leading shutting it down is no longer a member of the military. And for those that weren't here when we talked about it, Trump has fired all non-white male members of the military and not the military as a whole, but the higher echelons of the military, including the military lawyers who probably were the ones that were speaking out against Trump when that conversation was going on behind the scenes. So that should be concerning to all of us because there's a lot of behind the scenes stuff that I don't know about. This is just the stuff that I know about. So some people are saying that speaking out against Trump publicly, Mark Elias of the Elias Law Group said on their website, President Trump is attempting to, and by the way, it doesn't take, at first I thought it took a lot of guts, but then I looked at who this firm was, and they actually represent Democrats in like most cases and don't have any big legal ties. But he basically said that, exactly what I was presenting about tonight, that this is an attack on rule of law and he's focusing on retribution against his political opponents. And and that the White House memo targets not only his law firm, but every attorney and law firm who dares to challenge his assault on the rule of law. Um, and his goal is clear. He wants everyone to capitulate and cower until no one is left to oppose his administration in court. And so basically, I'm gonna like let you guys read in the notes the rest of his comments. It's consistent with that. So lastly, this is my last slide. This is real. This is happening. We are dangerously close to dictatorial rule, very, very close. If I'm looking at things, I don't have the play-by-play from what happened in other dictatorships, but what I can say is we already have someone who has declared himself, the only person who matters in any kind of organization that has force in our country, and we've already seen him ignore the places that normally, by the way, what happens is the judiciary comes up with a court order, right? And the court order has to be carried out by the executive branch, which is the marshals, the police, people like that are under the executive branch are the basically the ones that make sure that there's enforcement of the laws and the interpretation of the laws of the judiciary. What we're seeing here is that Trump is calling the shots on what's legal and what's not legal. That's exactly what his executive order says. So I think we all need to rise up swiftly and in unison to say to Trump, this is not acceptable. We you're our president. It seems like you were elected as our president rightfully. So be our president, but don't do these things. There needs to be a bridge that he is told very clearly that he can't cross. And, some people think that if democracy burns down, that it's going to make democracy rise again. It doesn't work that way. If democracy burns down, the most common thing to happen is that a dictator takes hold. And we're in a burning building right now, everyone. We need to talk politics and we need to talk politics politely. We need to share the recording of this event, which will be up on YouTube in the next week with friends and family, especially those that are Trump supporters, and invite them to our online community. Let's talk with them and let's understand their perspective. I'm very willing to listen, and if I'm wrong, I'll admit I'm wrong. I have no problem with that. But we need to understand that this could very well be the end of American democracy if we don't do these things. We need to encourage people to fact check what I'm saying. Please fact check what I'm saying with non-politically biased sources. If you go to only right-wing news, they will tell you what the right wing wants you to hear. They will not tell you the things that are objectively true. We did an event where we fact checked right wing, left wing, and center, and I can tell you that that there were misunderstandings, as the best word to call it, but there were misrepresentations by right wing media when we did that. And that's been true when I fact check right wing media for the last, ever since the Iraq War. Um, you have to be careful. Left wing media will ignore anything that favors the right wing, so they lie by omission, but the right wing will just make stuff up that has no basis in truth. And so you have to be careful what sources you look at and look for non-politically biased sources that you can fact check with. So I have no problem with Trump being president for the next 4 years, but none of us should. But we should all support democracy and make sure that Trump does not become a dictator. I do have a problem with him circumventing rule of law, ignoring our elected representatives, and ignoring the whole judicial branch of government, and intimidating, most importantly, those that would stand up to him using the power of force, the military, the police, and the rest of the executive branch. You don't have to speak out against Trump if as a person if you support him, but I do think everybody should speak out against the actions he's taking now and against the bullying he's doing against people who criticize him. You really need to understand that when someone criticizes you, I'm going to go to a Buddhist quote. The person who points out your flaws, you should treat the trusted friend who points out your flaws as if they reveal a cache of hidden treasure. We should really recommend that to Trump. When people point out his flaws, he should look at it as a blessing. And if he started doing that, I would respect the man so much more. And he's capable of it. He just needs someone to whisper it into his ear like they did to Caesar. I don't know if he's capable of it in this life, Carl's shaking his head, but he will be capable of it eventually. We had another event on reincarnation. We'll have another one later. But there's peer-reviewed science says that people reincarnate, and so he will get another chance. And what he's doing in this life will catch up to him. Whether it's good or bad will be judged by people, entities greater than us. So that said, we're going to go into the Q&A portion of the evening. Ron, if you can, just raise your hand with the bottom, like there's a raise hand. Do you not have it? Okay, just I don't
It's
know
in
where.
the React button.
Ron, you're gonna go after Ginny. So after Ginny and before Victor. So if Will, if you can keep track of if Ron has questions to put him in line and then bring him back in. So as we're doing Q&A, I want people to know sort of our rules of engagement. So first of all, keep your comment or question every time you raise your hand, keep it to one comment or question at a time. Keep it to less than 2 or 3 minutes initially, and then anyone that wants to respond in the whole group can just speak up after the person finishes speaking, but keep those replies, those comments or questions to under 20 seconds. And you can reply to anyone that just spoke or about that individual hand raise. So that's how we do it. So that way we can have everybody be able to converse with each other. But we get through we don't want to spend more than 5 minutes on any individual raised hand. Unfortunately, Margot is working tonight, so we don't have her for our timekeeper. If anyone else is a good timekeeper, there is the ability to add timekeeping here, so if someone can let us know if we're 5 minutes over on a topic, that'd be great. So Carl had his hand up first, so Carl, go ahead.
And I guess everybody could have their own timer. We'll have a phone. I am speechless, Garrett. I don't think I've ever been as depressed after one of your lectures
Sorry,
today.
Carl.
It is stunning. I think I commented in the chat. My only comment in the chat was that as I'm looking at everything you're saying, I'm going, oh, that's what Putin did. Oh, that's what Putin does. Oh, I don't see a single difference. And the funny thing is that we've known this for like 8 years ago. We've known the type of person that he was. They've on Fox and everything.
That reminds me, Carl. I'm going to let you finish, but I want to ask people.
I'm sorry.
Ask the Trump supporters to talk first because I don't want people agreeing with me, and then for people to not feel.
Okay. So I'll just keep it to the point that I think I'm going to one disagreement, which is what can we do about it? I mean, I listen to the news every day. It is more depressing because the only thing that's happening is it's just stating what's happening.
Yep.
And I don't see any way out at this point because
it's talk to military. Talk to anyone you know in the military and explain to them what's going on. This is going to come down to the military. I hate to say it.
Yeah, but that's what I'm worried about. You said it, Garrett. You said the military is being expunged to the loyalists.
Well,
so that's why I'm
the
being
top
very
of the military is, and you're right, and
yeah.
It's really being expunged to only white males, which Trump feels like because he's supporting white males, white males will support him. Whether or not that's true remains to be seen. And there were a lot of white males that were a part of the civil rights movement, for example, and white females as well. So
so that relates to my main point, which is your four steps on what we can do. And I'm
Mhm.
trying to be as realistic as what can we really do?
Yep.
I disagree with 2 out of the 4 because speaking out is not going to work because of all the fear that's already there. You got to have massive guts. You can't be a Navalny.
Yeah.
Nobody's going to be like Navalny in this United States.
Well, we're not Navalny. Like, have you seen, if you've seen V for Vendetta, at the end of that movie, everyone comes out in support of V, and they all come out in these masks to show themselves anonymous. If we,
Yeah.
the population,
Okay.
consistently,
Right.
including Trump
Okay.
supporters, all speak out against
Right.
Trump,
All right.
and the
But that
only
takes
voice that's
right.
heard
You have to
is
be anonymous.
anti-Trump.
You have to be anonymous, which is when they the Musks and the Googles and own the social media, it's going to be very difficult to be anonymous.
I don't
That's
think we
one.
have to be anonymous if we're
But
consistent. Go ahead.
let me continue so I can finish in the 2 minutes.
Yeah, go ahead.
The only so 4, number 4, the legal defense, same thing. The legal fields are scared also, understandably so. The only 2 that we can really do is number 2, which is vote strategically. Everybody has always said if you want to change something, you have the power of the vote.
I did mention
Yes,
that
up
one.
to a point, but
Yeah.
I'm wondering these days whether
Yeah,
that's going to
well,
be
there's a
happening.
chance that that won't matter, but we certainly have to make the most of the voting that we do seem to have.
Right. So that's the only thing I can think of, like vote everybody
Yeah.
out. But here and then the third one, which is economic pressure. Those are the only 2 realistic things we can do. The other 2 we can't anymore because of the fear. I mean,
I
it
think we
seems like,
can.
and that's the last thing I'm going to say.
Yeah,
It's like Trump has basically had 8 years to talk to Putin about, hey, give me your playlist,
yeah.
give me your strategies of how you became so great, and that's what they're doing. That's what he's doing. They've had plenty of time to do it. And the sad thing is that it seems like there's no more decency anymore because they've just made it publicly with Project 25 and stuff. They're just nobody's afraid anymore to break the law, to be, racist, misogynist, whatever. And that's the sad part. I mean, from where the 1700s when the founding fathers settled these, checks and balances, it seems like it's all burned down. And that's the depressing part.
Yeah.
That's it. Yeah.
Thank you, Carl.
It's,
I want
it's
to
over,
ask
way over
people.
2 minutes.
Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead, Will. Thanks.
That's way over 2 minutes. I'll just give a wave if you like, Garrett, when people get to 2 minutes.
I may not see you, so feel free to just jump in and say, we're about. If it's 3 minutes, jump in. Do a wave at 2 minutes if you could. Thank you for being
3?
timekeeper,
Okay.
Will. Yeah, 3 minutes, jump in. So I want to let Trump supporters, people, let me start with this. Anyone who feels like I have mischaracterized Trump, I want to hear from you first so that you feel comfortable speaking up. So I'm going to ask people, keep your hands up because I want you to keep in order, but do me a favor and write in the chat if you believe I have mischaracterized Trump and you want to say something. Let's give people a minute. Okay, so Ariel, Michael, you have your hand up. So why don't you go first, and then Ariel, if you want to you have your hand up, so we'll have you go next. So Michael, tell me how I've mischaracterized Trump.
Simply want to be an activist president or a dictator.
What's
And I
that?
would say an activist president or a dictator. So, basically he's trying to remove all resistance to the kind of agenda that he sees as part of the deep state. That's his mindset, okay? He wants to remove the deep state from interfering with his policy changes. So the question is, what does he see as necessary to do that in order to remove this deep state? This is just a hypothesis, at least. I would also say that as far as how close we are to Trump being a dictator, there's a lot of things that would have to happen. First of all, there's still the power of the purse. Trump can be defunded completely. And if he were to try to seize funds to support his purposes, he would be impeached by all the Republicans in Congress and the House of Representatives, okay? The other thing is, so I kind of look at it that way. He could be resisted just by simply defunding the U.S. government indefinitely with cause, okay? That's one barrier. The other thing is the
Say that
states.
again. I don't think I heard that right.
Okay, but he could be defunded, okay, by Congress. The federal government could be completely defunded. The police officers wouldn't get their paycheck. Everybody enforcing the law, the FBI, etc., they wouldn't get a paycheck.
Well, let's keep
Basic.
down that path. I mean, if Trump has the power of the police and the military, he could just tell the people with the electronic payment records, look, pay these guys or you're going to get shot. He's the
Well,
sole arbiter of the law.
the point that I'm making is that I don't think that there's any person reasonable in the Senate or House of Representatives that's even a Republican
They don't
that
have
would
to do
allow
it.
that to happen.
They don't have to do it. He can shoot all of them if he wants to.
Well, let's put it this way. I don't think that Trump has that sort of motivation.
Not yet. Not yet. And maybe he doesn't, but then why is he ignoring the judiciary? Help me understand. All I said is that he ignores the judiciary and he is the sole arbiter of the law according to him. So, help me understand like where was I off base there? Like were my facts incorrect or you just think that I'm like help me understand.
Well, it is very possible that the president is trying to overstep his amount of coercive power that he has. But the question is that overstep the magnitude of an account to him wanting to be a dictator as far as his, motivation for doing these things? How do we know really what his motivation is? And
Well,
what I'm basically saying is that I don't believe that's his motivation.
do we
Okay.
care though what his motivation is? I mean, if someone is like, let's say has a psychotic break and is told by, you know, like their psychotic break that torturing an innocent baby for fun is going to bring them to heaven and they do it, do we care that they were trying to go to heaven? Or do we say, look, you just tortured an innocent baby, you should go to jail?
Well, say, give your example that Trump could just shoot the senators and the people in the House of Representatives, take over. Somebody's going to have to carry out that order. And
Yeah,
I
that's why
really
I
don't,
said that's why I
I,
said the
and what,
military is what matters right now because
and I don't think the military would carry out that order, frankly.
not yet.
I don't, no, I don't think that they ever will in the United States. Okay. I think it's,
I hope you're right, but the military is mostly Republican and largely Trump supporting. And so the question is if they think they're doing it for a good cause because all of the members of Congress that Trump doesn't like are members of the deep state, well, maybe they will do it because they're getting rid of deep staters, right?
so as far as the comment about the military being primarily Republican, the question is what percentage of it is Republican, what percentage is Democrat? Is there a significant enough percentage to actually exert that type of coercive force? No, there isn't. Okay, so there isn't a case to be made that the military would actually act in that way.
So I'm looking it up. It's about 7 in 10 white veterans lean Republican. I'm looking for the current. So I think we only know about veterans, not about the current military, but it was actually 72% that leaned Republican. 63% of veteran voters identified with or leaned towards Republican Party, and 35% were Democrats. So about twice as many Republicans as Democrats. So
So what I would,
if there was a civil war in America, I had someone just this morning ask me whether or not I think there will be a civil war in America. And if there was, and there were 2-to-1 Republican military members against Democrats, I don't think it would align that way, by the way. And I don't think the military will go along with this right now, but we're moving in a direction of like towards authoritarianism. And if we don't stop that slide, I think we could get to a point where everybody is too afraid of Trump to stand up against him.
That was my
I,
point.
I,
That's what
I think
happened.
that you're,
That's what happened in Nazi Germany, by the way. Hitler was democratically elected. He was also put in jail for a coup attempt. Trump had a coup attempt as well, but he wasn't put in jail.
I don't think that MAGA wants Trump in power for the same reason the German people wanted Hitler in power. Okay, I
No, but
really don't.
that doesn't mean there aren't parallels, right? And so all I'm doing is pointing out the parallels. It's not an exact replica, right? They say that history doesn't repeat itself, but it certainly rhymes, so something like that.
I'm still
I mean,
speculating.
I mean, so would the military, would those Republicans uphold the Constitution,
That's
you
the
know,
question.
versus Trump? I would say yes. That you can't just say that because somebody's a Trump supporter in the military that or voted for Trump, if that means a Trump supporter, that they're going to blatantly violate the Constitution of the United States and
I
follow
think you're
his
right.
orders.
I think you're right now. And that's why I'm saying that what we need to do is, while, Carl is already saying, and Carl's already saying that he feels concerned that people won't speak their mind to anyone. And what if no one in the government felt like they could speak what if no one in the military felt like they could speak their mind against Trump? Because in the military, if violate commands, you can get shot, so like you get court-martialed and you end up in a really ugly spot. So the question is whether or not we allow open dialogue. And I think I made a good presentation that we are shutting down open dialogue right now. That's what concerns me, is we're shutting down free speech. The very free speech that Trump's supporters claim to be very loyal to. So loyal that they say giving money is free speech.
I'm not saying that I support Trump. I'm just saying that I believe it's a mischaracterization of
Okay.
his, that's all I'm basically saying. There's also the resistance from states, okay? The
Yep.
blue states are not going to go along with Trump. They have national guards, they have police forces and everything else. They would cooperate, okay, with the National Guard of that state. Take all the police departments in California and the National Guard of the police, and the U.S. military tries to come in here and they're trying to shoot and kill basically, police officers from California and the Highway Patrol and everybody else. You think they would do something like that? Do you think that a point like that would actually come in this country where these soldiers would be used by Trump to do that?
We
And
have
that's why
done
I'm saying
that,
I think
Michael. We've done
That's
that
how
to other
civil wars.
countries repeatedly. We've done
That's
it
how
to
civil
many other
wars start.
countries. And you know what?
this would
I
have
think
to,
those countries would cry a river if it happened to us.
yeah, I'm just saying that internally, okay, there's external and internal violence. This type of internal violence is not even tolerated by societies that have enormous external violence.
But
Just
the point is that we're
that's all I'm
very,
going to basically say.
yeah, no, I want to move on to Ariel, but the point that I'm making is that we think that we're immune to the possibilities of the things that we've done to all these other countries. I don't think we're immune. We're going down that path. And, it very well could have been Putin that put us down this path, because he got Trump elected the first time, by hacking Hillary Clinton's email servers. Not that they found much, but they made a big deal out of nothing. It was a nothing burger, but somehow it was a big deal. So, and that election was really close. So you can't say that couldn't have had an influence on the outcome. But I do appreciate you feeling that it was a mischaracterization, Michael. I might be mischaracterizing him. All I can say is that my facts, I think, are solid, and it doesn't sound like you contest the facts that I presented tonight. Is that fair?
That's fair, basically, be basically saying that. And the question is how far he'll go. And
Great.
that's the aspect of it that I disagree with. Okay. But
Got it.
that's
Thank you,
intent to
Michael. I
be a
appreciate it.
dictator.
Ariel, would love to hear from you.
Well, I already said a lot of it in the chat, but
I can't read the
it's a
chat, so I would love for you to say it out loud.
mischaracterization. He's not acting like a dictator. There's a lot easier ways that he could go about being a dictator if he wanted to. Look at
What would
President
that
Bush
be?
and the Patriot Act and all that. Look at anytime they've declared this state of emergency, or anytime they've shut down the censored the journalists and not or detoured your attention away from something and put something else there, and you're like, why are they talking? Why is all the journalists and all the media talking about this when this is going on?
Yeah, are
Okay,
you aware
it's a
that
problem. It's a
are you
problem when I have to go to Japan to find out, oh, there's a revolution going on in Hong Kong. The media was very slow to cover that. Now, what was up with that? That was Obama era. So there was more censorship, and this typical fascism, just to let you all know, it starts with the media, guys.
yeah,
It
so
starts with the media shutting down what you hear and dictating, excuse me, what is put out to you.
mhm.
That's
And do
fascism.
Do you think
And you
that's
saw a
not
lot of it
happening?
with Obama, and you saw
Yeah.
a lot of that with Mr. Biden.
I mean,
So,
if you look at the Washington Post for the first time in like 50 years, did not endorse a political candidate. And the Washington Post is owned by none other than, Mr. Amazon. And he was right behind Trump during the inauguration, along with Zuckerberg, Musk, and the billionaire crew. And basically the people who own the media have been supporting Trump, and even if it's subtly, they've been supporting Trump along the way because they're owned by wealthy businesses, and media free speech has been squelched in the media in a very significant way. So, I do think, you should also look at who's allowed in the press conference room. There was a major change by Trump, and only right-wing media, extreme right-wing media is allowed in the press room. So the liberal media doesn't have a very easy way to find out what the truth is. At least half, like two-thirds of the liberal media and half of the independent media have been taken out of the press room of the president.
well, I believe there was a lot of new media that had been barred in the past, people that had podcasts and such and kept up with events that were allowed in that were previously not allowed, which I thought was interesting. I thought that was a good way to go because whoever's got, the most traffic, the most people listening to it, that's who you want to impact, right? Um, but I would also correct you on the Amish supported Trump. A lot of people in the middle of the country supported Trump.
What
These are not,
what is
big
that a correction
corporations.
of? I'm sorry.
So
You
a
said
lot of
you said you
working
were
class
correcting
people.
me, Ariel. I don't think I said anything about who voted for Trump.
You said that Trump is supported by big corporations and rich people, and it made it sound like those were the only people that were
Oh no,
supporting him.
that's
You've
not what
got
I
a
was
lot of
saying.
little
No,
people that
no,
support.
there's a lot of common people, and I give a lot of credit to people when Trump has really given permanent tax increases to those of us as top income earners, and really what he's done is give temporary decreases or temporary decreases in tax for the middle and lower class, but actually those are going to expire unless they get renewed. Whereas those for the top earners, those are going to be perpetual. So that was pretty clever. But I do give a lot of credit for the lower and middle class people that vote for him because they are essentially voting against their best interest in many respects. And it takes courage to do that. So I appreciate that. I would never say that Trump is only voted for by the wealthy. He's a populist president. So I'm just saying
Okay.
that the people who own the media are supporting him and they're censoring what is written about him in the media, which is what you said is the beginning of dictatorship.
Yes, but I still see plenty of articles online and in various convenience stores wherever I look, against Trump. So if you want to see the other side of things, you can find it. They're not. I don't think they're not.
Right now, you can. Yeah,
Not available.
yeah,
If you, I always look on both sides. I always see what the right
good,
is pitching today, and then I see what the left is pitching, and then I see what everybody else is pitching.
good.
Um,
That's
because
all. That's all I could ever ask of you is look at the left, look at the right, and look at the center, and then make up your own mind. I'm curious if there are any facts that I presented tonight that you would dispute.
um, I think I have a problem with DEI, and I have a problem with the military thing. I think as commander in chief, um, the only thing I would say about him firing significant people at the top, if he found them to be, obviously, if you're commander in chief and you are going to be giving orders to your top generals and people, you do not want a general in there that is left of center, that is going to question your authority or undermine, your ability to be commander in chief.
What
So
if,
I would just posit that as a possible explanation for that. And then as far as DEI, I think I've already made myself clear in the chat, but I'll just reiterate. Um, I think that people should be hired in the jobs that they are best able to do and the best candidates. If you're
Great.
talking about the top military, We need the top people in the military. We
Great.
do not need to be checking boxes that we have, one LGBTQ person, we have one Indian person, there's one white female, there's one African American. No, we need the top people,
Yeah.
regardless of race, not because of race or
Yeah.
because of
I
sexuality.
agree with you.
It's nobody's business. It's nobody's business what
I agree
you're
with
into.
you.
I don't care.
I
You
agree
know,
with you 100%, but Ariel, that's what DEI does. You should you should look at our recording of the event on DEI. I give a lot of sources on what DEI is. You support DEI. You just don't support the version of DEI that Trump is peddling, which is not the real version. He's doesn't know what DI is. He's saying DI is something other than what it is, and you seem to believe him. And I would really encourage you to look at the people who actually support DEI and what they say, because none of they would all agree with you, Ariel, and I agree with you too. The best person for the job should get the job. Now the question is the best person in the job for the job in all of the top military lawyers and officials all white men? Does that make sense, or does that look like it might be a little bit of racism and sexism?
well, if it's the old boys school,
Exactly what it is.
then that's a problem. Yes, definitely. If
Exactly what it
there
is right
are
now.
stellar candidates that should be in those spots, but instead they're hiring their buddies, then that's a problem. Yeah,
And that's
I agree.
exactly what's happening, Ariel. So I really recommend looking at the people who are removed and the rationale for removing them. You can also look up the fact that in Arlington Cemetery, all mentions of non-white men were removed from the graves, or from the mentions of the website of Arlington Cemetery. And a Black Medal of Honor winner in Vietnam was his URL. He was like, his mention of his Medal of Honor was removed, and it was changed to DEI medal on the URL. So there's a lot of stuff going on right now that's very concerning. You could look back at our past events. I don't want to digress on that stuff, but there are a lot of things going on that are very concerning.
I'll check it out.
Cool. Thank you. Appreciate your
You're
comments,
welcome.
Ariel.
Sure.
Is there anyone else that feels like I mischaracterized Trump? I just want to be sure that um, we get everyone's voice heard. I think we can probably go through hands now. Um,
I think I'm next.
yes, you are, Jenny. Go ahead.
You told me that I was
Garrett.
going after Ariel.
Oh,
You told
Oh, no. I actually, I was the very first one to put the hand up, but then I accidentally took it down and then put it back up, and I became a third person. But I think it is my turn. And with me, Garrett, I just want to say what a fantastic presentation you had. And it was a learning experience, as well as when I think of all the work you put into putting this presentation up and serving us and people here, not just here, but anyway, I just want to appreciate your presentation, first of all.
thank you.
And
Jeff.
my second, what I would like to pose is this question: when is what a president has done is considered an impeachable offense, and that kind of dialogue is going? When does that dialogue begin? Because I have not, because in my opinion, it's an opinion, many things that he has done thus far, to me, could be classified as impeachable offense. So when does that conversation take place, and should it already have been taken place?
Response to that is that the problem is that only Congress and the Senate can do the impeachment, and he's got him in his back. So
Yeah,
it's not going to happen.
Oh dear. Okay.
exactly. And he right now controls both the House and the Senate. So, and it requires, I think two-thirds of the Senate, if I'm not mistaken, to impeach. I'm doing that off the top of my head. Maybe I'm wrong. Oh no, the House has to impeach. It requires a majority of the Senate to approve it. But yeah,
And
right now we're nowhere near that.
sad, you know what's sad is when the actual Congress people and senators actually know what the offense is, and they have a microphone in their face, and you can see them weaseling out of it. That's the sad part. Yeah.
So thank you.
Oh dear. Oh dear. Oh
Thank you,
dear.
Jenny, for your kind words and your comments. And I think we did say Ron was coming after you, if I'm not mistaken, or maybe before, but I think you had your hand up before. It just got like
You
Zoom has this thing.
specifically said Ariel, then Victor. You specifically said that.
Oh,
Victor can go.
Specifically. You
sorry,
started
Victor.
out and you said after Ariel.
Sorry, Victor. My memory is terrible, especially when I'm hosting. So go ahead. We would love to hear from you.
Okay, so we can nuance this from the point of view of political science. Is the U.S. merely a backsliding democracy, which it's already been characterized as a backsliding democracy for quite some time? There's almost no laws passed of any significance after the first 9 to 18 months of any administration. Essentially, no one is governing the country, which is why there is this very, very wide, very loud cry for a strongman. Now, this strongman was comically inept in his first term of office, and he came in very prepared via Project 2025. So we are already, it seems to me, in a liberal democracy. There's a conception of the executive, which is that of a unitary executive, which resembles the executive power of Charles I. He's combining elements of Putin, Orban, and Erdogan. Putin's kleptocracy here, it is oligarchy, and in Russia, the former Soviet Union, it was the nomenclatura that became the oligarchy that is behind Putin. He's using elements of Erdogan's rule in Turkey, which basically, after the self-coup that was imposed in Turkey, there were 80,000 members of the civil service, particularly from the officer corps, from the police, from the professoriate, etc., who were removed from their positions. There are elements of the rule of Erdogan in Turkey, where you have a combination of gerrymandering, which has been going on for quite some time in terms of House seats, and then you have the persecution of the other. Trump is not expelling more immigrants than any of the presidents all the way back to Reagan, not even coming close. He is simply making it highly visible, particularly with the jailing of families in Texas during his first time in office. So what we have here is we're heading towards the execution of his executive order on January the 20th, in which he asks his Hesketh and Christine Noem to put on his desk within 90 days a decision as to whether he should apply the Insurrection Act, which he tried to apply numerous times, and he had traditional Republicans in his first administration, as well as attorneys in the administration, who prevented him from doing that. So the firing of the top JAGs, the firing of the head of the Joint Chiefs, the firing of the key admiral in the general staff, all of this is a prelude to what will happen on April the 20th. Now, I do not want to overstate this, because I spent my life, trying to parry friends who use the word fascism very, very loosely during their entire lifetime. And so, but April the 20th, which is the day that a decision will be made on the executive order, which was signed on January the 20th, April the 20th, they will have on his desk a decision as to whether he is going to apply the Insurrection Act. What do you think their response is going to be? April the 20th just happens to be, I am not making this up, the birthday of a certain failed Austrian artist who later annexed the Sudetenland and invaded Poland. That's the day that the decision will be made. Look it up. I'm not making any of this up. And if you think that this is excessive, his father was arrested at a Klan rally in 1928. He had a governess who was fond of the Third Reich. According to his wife in the Vanity Fair interview, it was 1988 or 1989 in Vanity Fair, She said that in the early to mid 1980s, a close friend of his gave him a single book. That book was not Mein Kampf. That book was a book of the speeches of Adolf Hitler. It is the only book that we know that Trump has read and read repeatedly. She said in the interview that he read it. He had it at his bedside for not infrequent bedtime reading. That is the words of his first wife. She thinks this is excessive. Fine. He said he would be a dictator on day one, and he previously tried to apply the Insurrection Act. And the Insurrection Act is essentially martial law. The martial law would be used to stop what is in the executive order. The wording is illegal migration. It doesn't say immigration. It says illegal migration, and then it would be used on national security grounds to arrest anyone who opposes his incarceration of immigrants, whether they're legal or illegal, in federal facilities before they're expelled from the United States. So look to April the 20th for the distinct possibility that martial law will be imposed already in the United States. I didn't think it would be that early until I read the executive order from January 20th, which calls on Hesketh and Christine Noem to give their report on the applicability of the Insurrection Act. I would say that you have to. I'm sorry?
Try to finish your thoughts. You're going a little longer than 3 minutes.
So we've got his executive orders and memos. There's virtually not a single one that has not violated either the U.S. Constitution, congressional law, or federal regulation. The courts rule against him after lawsuits are filed, and they succeed, at least, with some sort of initial ruling, right? Some initial relief, and he simply he ignores the judicial ruling. So the unitary executive is already quite firmly in place, and this has been part of the plan, and it is part of the plan of Curtis Yarvin, who and his vice president is a direct follower of Curtis Yarvin. The plan specifically to seize Greenland, Canada, and Panama is from Curtis Yarvin, okay? Basically to seize an entire continent. This is the hubris of Napoleon with his continental system. This goes far beyond any form of irredentism, the irredentism of Putin in South Ossetia, Abkhazia, or the eastern Ukraine. So he's talking about seizing a continent, and this is very much part of the plan that was in place before he came into office.
Thank you, Victor. So yeah, I mean, there's a very high legal bar for being able to use the Insurrection Act, but you're right, that's what I was referring to, that he tried to do in his first term, and the military said no. But remember, he just got rid of a number of the members of the military. The member of the military that prevented it from happening in his first term is no longer there. And he got rid of a bunch of the lawyers, the non-white male lawyers that are in the military. So, the question is whether the military will allow him to do the Insurrection Act, or whether they'll say, no, that's not okay. And the question is whether or not Congress will allow him to do the U.S. Insurrection Act. And it's purportedly to help with immigration, but why do we need it for immigration? Because to your point, he's not necessarily expelling more immigrants already as it is with the resources that he has, and why will having the military help with that? Most people overstay visas and are here, so I just don't see that as being a solution. This is why I say that everybody, including Trump supporters, should say, look, Trump, it's okay for you to be president, but it's not okay for you to, declare the Insurrection Act, which says that the military can be deployed, the federal military can be deployed domestically, as Trump sees fit as the commander in chief, especially if he's going under a position where he's the sole arbiter of the law. So that's very concerning. So
Well, if the military were to, first of all, begin applying the Insurrection Act to illegal immigrants, for instance, then you would have a lot of silence surrounding this, but you would also have immediate resistance. He's not even coming close to equaling the number of asylum seekers, refugees, illegal immigrants who were expelled by Biden or Obama, let alone Bush, where the numbers were higher, Clinton, where the numbers were even higher, and in the Reagan era, were also exceedingly high. You can look at statistics on the Department of Homeland Security website. But if he was to do so with the military, there would be a civil war within the military. That is what happens during coups. Coups very seldom go very smoothly. There's usually factionalism within the military. In addition, you have to remember, in addition to the police who are behind him, okay, to a very significant degree, the militias are armed and they are behind him. Armed Americans are overwhelmingly from rural areas. They're overwhelmingly Republicans. African Americans have been arming themselves in recent years in significant numbers, but the portion of Americans that have arms is immense. It's like 4 times the number per capita in Canada, and they are, let's just say, to a highly significant degree, Trump supporters. So in a situation of civil war within the military, there would be factions in the American public that would back the military in such a move. You've got basically around 32% of Americans want an outright authoritarian leader, and you have 44% who want a strong man. They want basically a liberal democracy, not unlike that of Putin's Russia.
Can you post a source for that claim? That sounds a little surprising to me. I did fact check the immigration numbers, and it's absolutely true that Barack Obama and Biden both deported more immigrants than Trump did. Bill Clinton.
Post numbers for what? What are you asking me to post numbers for?
No, I was asking if you could post the thing about that. Something like 60 to 70% of Americans want either a strong man or a dictator.
No. That's not what I said.
Okay.
I said that a total of about 32% want an authoritarian leader, and about 44% want a strong man. So that 44% contains the 32%.
Oh, okay.
Okay, so it's nowhere
could you
near.
Still post that? I would like to see that. That still sounds high.
Yeah, it's been various polls. I think
that's okay. Just if you could look one up for us, Victor, and post it in the chat for us.
Can I make a real quick comment, really briefly, because we have a lot of hands out there.
Yes,
I just want to maybe just remind everyone, to think about the point of the discussion and questions and comments, because I don't think there's any benefit in actually listing all the negative things, with all due respect, Victor, very well thorough, but it's not doing anything to list everything in addition to what Garrett mentioned, all the negative things. Okay, we know that, we see that in the news every day. What now is what I'm trying to figure out.
I thought the part about the insurrection thing was new to me, so that was useful, and I didn't know the immigrant numbers.
Yeah.
I think it's interesting, Carl, because and I do think we need to be respectful of time, and we have a lot of hands up, so I want to move quicker, but I do want people to be able to share their mind. Like I did not know Trump, deported less people than the Democrats before and after him. Like that's fascinating for the people that want to be tough on immigration. That means that Trump was very ineffective at that, which is fascinating because he was much more brutal, separating that 5-year-old kids from their parents for years. And, I know at least one parent committed suicide for not seeing their young child for years. And it's like, that's terrible stuff. So, Luann, how are you?
Let's move on. Yeah, Luann.
Hi, I just wanted to say that I don't believe that Trump wrote this, and I would be very surprised if he read it. There has been a long, well documented, not conspiracy theory, attempt to bring us to this point by a lot of people in this country. You know, political leaders, billionaires, religious leaders, publishing houses have all been working to get somebody in the position of the presidency who will do these things. And I don't think, I think that Trump, to all appearances, acts like a slightly demented, malignant narcissist, and very insecure, very easily manipulated. And somebody is pulling his strings. And he is not the enemy, really. He is just whoever is bringing us to this point is Project 25, is probably a lot of people that I don't know the names of. And I just want to say that I don't think that this is Trump.
Yeah.
I think that it's a much stronger, much more powerful thing. And I think that we may have lost the country. I mean, I think it might be a blessed miracle if the military rose up against them, but I don't believe that that's going to happen. So, and thank you for the presentation.
You're welcome. I do hope the military will rise up. If necessary, I hope it won't be necessary, but I think we may find out. And I'm hopeful that the military will uphold their oath to the Constitution. All right, that timer is not.
I didn't set the timer, Garrett.
Okay.
Someone else has taken the liberty of doing it, not me.
Yeah, I think that's a little too intrusive, so I'm gonna turn off the timers. But I do appreciate the spirit. It's just more, I feel like it's more polite to just have someone speak up than it is to have a big thing. Yeah. I'm gonna turn off the meeting timers. But Bill, you want to go next? Thank you, Luann.
Sorry about that.
Okay.
Just a couple of things, great conversations around. Liz Cheney, a couple of years, maybe 2 years ago, said two things. One is the courts don't have an army. And so this goes to your point. And the other, she said, is it only takes a handful, and I believe these are quotes, a handful of people to make this happen in terms of how far down you go through the military. If you say to a couple of colonels, do this, and they say no way, and they walk, then they'll go down to the next layer and they get enough to do it. And that's what she said can work. That said, that's kind of goes to the violence and the military thing. Well before any of that happens, it's the financial and career destruction that can happen to individuals if Trump so deems it, that can happen over and over again to thousands of people, to destroy your career, completely shut off your financial resources if either directly if you're a government employee or indirectly if you're in a law firm or various ways contractually. So, it's a little dramatic, not impossible to think about physical violence and militaries and militias rising up. But well before that happens, the harm that can be done to many thousands of individuals is unbelievable. Somebody mentioned that dictatorship begins with the control of the media. I don't know if you've gone on YouTube. You have Joe Rogan, you have Charlie Kirk, you have Shapiro, countless others filling the airwaves with conservative and far right wing. So this whole notion of the right wing, the left controlling media is bizarre. And the other thing is, finally is when I talk to Trump supporters, and over the years they call it whataboutism. And what about when Obama deported more people? He was the deporter in chief, they said for a while. There is no whataboutism when it comes to defying courts. There is no precedent to this. And it goes back to the core, really, of this whole conversation. Everything else can be considered noise if it's immigration, if it's Doge, all of that is, plus or minus. but there's zero whataboutism when it comes to this. And I don't, and I'm glad you made it and we should keep it the spotlight of this conversation, because it truly is unprecedented and the most dangerous of anything that's been happening here. And this lastly is, you mentioned it, I just want to repeat it. The left really lies in media. If you're listening or watching to your news, that's probably a mistake. You should be reading it. But the left lies by omission, and I've learned that directly. And the right basically creates lies by commission. But one's a little more insidious. When you leave out things, it's a little harder to figure out what's going on. But if you hear something you think is a lie, you just hear it. So it's really, as I said before, I've listened to NPR for God knows how many, 25, 30 years. I turned it off. 5 years later, I came back and I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Anyway, that's about all I have to say, though. But whataboutism ends at eliminating the judiciary from legitimacy.
Yeah, that's exactly where, for me, that crosses the line. Like, again, I don't mind if people support Trump. Like, you're welcome to support Trump. Just don't support him ignoring the judiciary, because that's basically saying he's above rule of law. And that's where I say you've crossed the line. Like, Trump has crossed the line. You can't ignore the judiciary. Trump's job and his executive order should be rescinded. We should all be demanding that he rescind it, that he is the sole arbiter of the law by the executive branch. No, that's what the judiciary does, and they send the court orders which tell the executive branch what they're supposed to enforce. So, no, Trump, you're not the sole arbiter of the law of the executive branch. That's the judiciary's job. That's why they exist, to arbitrate the law. Te amo, princesa. Ten cuidado, princesa.
Can I ask you a question, Garrett, regarding
Yeah,
that?
please.
Is it possible that most of the population is not really aware of what's going on because they're
Very
mostly
much.
tuned to Fox News, and the Fox News is very narrative driven, right? They're not talking about all the negative sides. So I'm wondering if it's going to make a difference, even with voting. I know I said that we could vote, but if more than half the population is unaware of all this, then they're not going to vote.
Well, that's
Any
why I
different.
say that everybody here should share. If everyone here shares with 5 people and they share with 5 people and they share with, 5 people, we'll have the whole world covered, right? So,
Yeah.
share this video when it goes up on YouTube and keep an eye out for it on the Free Thinker Institute channel, and then share it. And let's just have a spread of, hey, everyone's got to be aware of this. This is crossing, it was referred to as crossing the Rubicon, which is, the ancient Roman, that was the threat
Point
of,
of no return, yeah.
yeah. So, but anyway, it's the point of no return, basically, is probably the easier way to call it, for those not familiar with
But
Greek.
Garrett, you should be aware that Trump could just destroy your career and your livelihood.
Well, he might, and I honestly, if what's it called? Yes, please stop, Aaliyah. Aaliyah, no. Por favor, princesa. So if what's it called? The Insurrection Act is declared, then that's a big deal. I didn't know about that one either that Victor pointed out. I didn't know that there was a request to evaluate that. You know, so yeah, let's let Ron go because we still have a bunch of hands up.
Can I just say one last thing is a
Yeah.
little bit of a plug, but it's an organization that I think is absolutely aligned with FTI. It's called fairforall.org. And if you read their charters, it sort of sounds like a classic left of center. But when they say fair for all, they do mean fair for all. It's very sober and very thoughtful group. And if you're interested, I would encourage looking
If you
into
know
it.
anyone there that wants to collaborate, I would love to chat with them. So feel free if do you know anyone there that you can make an introduction?
I know a local chapter person. It is a national organization. They're pretty strong. I read some of the great essays that they write. But I think I could check with the local person, but
Yeah. See if they have someone that
yeah.
can talk about a collaboration. I would love to. I always look for collaborations, and it's nice to, I think Fair for All is a great name. I can get behind that. It's a great tagline. Although,
Yeah.
I'll say like pro-life is a good tagline too, but I tend not to be pro-life. I did an event on I am pro-life, but I'm not against abortions in the first 2 trimesters. We had another topic on abortion, and I
Wow.
gave the argument for that. Why, I think that the spirit isn't in the body until the 3rd trimester anyway, so it's not really killing a life. But anyway,
Yeah.
I digress. Sorry, we want to stay focused.
Sure. Okay. Yep.
Yeah,
Yep.
thank you, Bill, and I would love to meet, even if it's the local chapter person, I would love to meet them.
Okay. We'll do it.
Cool. Ron, go ahead. Sorry about that, Ron. False start.
Thanks, Garrett, and thanks for your invite and all that jazz. And I'm going to try to cut mine into about half because I saw Simone Seth was interested in jumping in, so I want to see if I can half my time and share it with her. Just to kind of roll back, Ron, New York, USA, and to my sisters and brothers in Canada, especially Toronto, Ontario. Love you folks. Hope to drop in there and see you later in the month and party because I love the Canadian folks because they know how to party. I had thought that this was going to be associated with the EO, was it 14215, which I actually had posted on the site there. But it seems to have digressed into a more general aspect, wherein I would want to point out a couple amusing things to take a look at in the entertainment realm would be a couple movies. One positive looking 1776, which I always love, which kind of gives a aspect with regards to how this country actually was formed based on the Declaration of Independence. And the other one, a little bit darker and concerning, 6 Days in May, that kind of talks about the aspect of the U.S. being taken over by nefarious forces. If you've not seen it, unfortunately, you have to suffer through black and white because Ted Turner didn't colorize it. But I kind of want to go back to the executive order because in it, in my opinion, it kind of to me brings out more what I consider incompetency that we've even seen in the last 2 days with the exposure of war plans via a commercially available application. But here it says, since it would be impossible for the president to single-handedly perform all executive business for a federal government, blah, 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 which then is countermined within the next 2 sentences or so, saying that all the officials remain subject to the president's ongoing supervision and control. It seems to be contradictory. And in it, as you kind of like pointed out, effectively everything kind of points back to the president, which in essence, relatively defines dictatorship, where one person is kind of controlling things. I've seen a lot of presidential orders, but I've not heard a heck of a lot, except for the recent one on extending the
3 minutes. Sorry to interrupt. That's 3 minutes. You've just hit 3 minutes, just to let you know that.
Oh, okay,
Just
thanks.
keep it
I'm
quick.
sorry.
Keep it quick, Will. But yeah, thank you. Try to finish up,
Yeah.
Ron.
So the financial things is about the only thing, the expanding the debt ceiling, so the government can spend more money that supposedly we're supposed to be saved.
Try to finish up because we only have 10 minutes left.
So that's kind of about what is. It seems like inconstancy is ruling the day here, if not something more nefarious.
Thanks, Ron. Yeah, I do think I don't think it's incompetency. Like this is a very concerted attack on our democracy, and it's well thought through. It's slow and steady, and it's getting worse and worse as time continues. So
Want to
that's
be generous.
yeah. I like to give people the benefit of the doubt too, but I'm at the point where I need to call an alarm bell, and You know, maybe it's too late to do it, but I hope not. And I hope that we can get enough people to say to Trump, you got to listen to the judiciary, that we have a legal system for a reason and you're accountable to it. Peace lover.
Oh, hi.
All right, go ahead. Try to
I'm
keep
just
it
about,
under 1 minute if we can now. Will give us
all
a
right.
warning at 1 minute because we have like 5 hands up in
I just
10 minutes.
think, can you hear me, Garrett?
Yeah,
Can you
go
hear
ahead,
me?
peace lover.
Okay.
Yeah,
So I just, this whole idea of being isolationist, like that's what I see in people. Like they seem to like care mostly about themselves and we're losing that community kind of feel and you know yeah, I'm a peace lover. I hate, I hate the name calling. I mean, tonight I've been trolled by a couple people who I can tell their mentality. Um, they're not listening to you, how serious this is, and they still want to defend. And y- you know, I can't break through to my own friends. It's like they watch Fox News and it's just so discouraging and I'm leaving this presentation even more scared and more upset.
I'm
I
sorry. I
just
try to give
believe
hope to people, and I do think
no,
there's
there's
hope,
no
but there's
hope.
only hope if
There's
we
no
do.
hope because on
Yeah,
this very presentation here I'm being trolled. I was called a cat lady. Um, you know, I mean, they say the same old key points Fox says all the time. They talk about how the left is so biased and everything. Well, look for the information. Look for the information, look for the facts. And Garrett
yep,
gave us facts tonight.
yep.
And
And
I'm
so
just sick
far,
of it.
the
I'm
people
You're
sick
at
that,
of
1 minute.
it.
You're at
And
one
yes,
minute.
I'm emotional and nobody will listen to me because I'm so upset and mad. So I'm
yeah.
going to
So
say good
that's why,
night.
look, I
Good
want to
night.
encourage you to stay calm because when you get, like
I'm ready to march. I'm thinking I
good,
need a gun. I don't believe in guns. And yes, that whole idea about the guns and the militia, it's true. People like me, we're doomed because I don't have a gun. I don't believe in violence.
right?
We are the good people.
Yeah,
You selfish, isolationist people who don't have empathy and care about the world and our environment. Trump has rescinded so many environmental things. All you care about is your pocketbook and your money. I live with a bunch of rich people down here in this red area. Bunch of
yeah,
rich people. They have second homes and they have boats and they're complaining and flying a Trump flag. What do they have to complain about? You want an oligarchy. You want an oligarchy. That's all I'll
so
say.
try
We're
to
losing democracy, and you proved it tonight. Thank you, Garrett, and good night. I'm mad.
try to
Sorry.
relax,
Sorry.
and I appreciate that you're going to
My blood
march.
pressure's up, but
I
thank you
know. I
so
don't
much.
want you to be upset. I do
I'm
want you to be
totally upset
motivated. I want you to be
because
motivated, but remember, if you
I
lose
don't know
your
how to do
motion,
it, Garrett. That's the one thing you didn't touch on. The things you said, I have written. I've called my Congress people. I wrote the letters. They said everybody flood your Congress. I wrote the letters to the congressman. All that stuff. That's not enough. The
hmm
GOP is bought. They're bought. It's
hmm
about money. It's about money. And then this is what you're going to get from MAGA. Oh, well, the other ones are corrupt too. Well, who's the worst? You did that presentation about Supreme Court. Who's the worst ones? The Republicans. They're the worst ones. They do the most horrible things compared to,
yes,
they don't
I want
care.
to. I
I'm
want to
sorry. I
get
have
to the
to go
next
because
person if
I'm
it's
out of
okay.
control.
I hear
I'm
you,
out of
and
control.
yeah, it's
I'm out of
okay.
control. Good
Yeah,
night.
I know
Thank
it's
you.
frustrating. It is frustrating.
It's frustrating, and you proved your point. And we
Yeah,
have people tonight on here that are trolling and saying stupid stuff. So it's pretty upsetting.
yeah.
Even Ariel, she doesn't even know what DEI is. She
Well,
doesn't know what
no,
that is.
so it's not Ariel, it's everybody that criticizes DEI. Everybody that criticizes DEI doesn't understand what DEI is really about,
I
which is
know,
about,
because guess what,
yeah,
Garrett, before your presentation, which was fantastic, I personally looked it up. I
yeah,
wanted to understand it better. They were getting to me. It's
yeah,
the quota stuff. We don't want the quotas. We want to open the field. Look at how intelligent the Indian people are. And, there's so many, the Japanese and like, do we just want white guys?
right. So
Like,
Let me
You know,
if I can, I'm gonna let Simone jump to the front here because I think she'll have a diverse opinion and I kind of want to hear it. So I would like to hear.
is it worth listening to her? What's she going to
It
say?
is. She's a very smart person, and I very much look forward to hearing what she has to say.
All right, I'm gonna listen to Simone and then I'm gonna get off here because I'm too upset. But thank
Okay,
you.
please, you
Sorry,
may be
sorry.
upset, but please listen with an open mind.
Thank you for allowing me to speak. I deeply regret attending this meeting because I felt intimidated and unsafe in articulating any viewpoint at all. I think your presentation, Garrett, was excellent. However, I think it was one-sided. For me, I attended this meeting. I knew the topic, but if I was going to do a presentation, one half of the presentation would be, is Trump a dictator? And the other half of the presentation would be, do we love Trump? The other perspective is not given air to breathe and to speak. And I appreciate people's views, but I do not want to participate in an organization or in a group where I'm called a racist and someone makes a comment about Indian people. I can't. I cannot. I'm sorry. This crossed a line for me about acceptable conduct. There was name calling, blatant racism about how dare you mention the intelligence of Indian people. I'm Indian. I know I'm brilliant, but I don't want to be singled out for that. How do you permit this? You are supposed to run this organization and this conversation. I
didn't
know
hear
you
any
can't
of that
control
said,
people.
and I can't moderate the chat while I'm
Nope.
presenting, Simone.
It's not
So,
the chat. It's also when people were speaking. And it's a
okay.
very sad situation because, frankly, although I agree with a great number of comments that were made, and I'm happy to learn an alternate perspective, I should not have to be afraid to participate. And unfortunately, that is what has
Feel
resulted.
afraid,
But
Simone,
thank you for
because
letting me speak.
so far, while people made the comments that you said, and with passion, there was no threats of retribution or even, anything that I could hear that was not like polite. There were comments about race, but that doesn't make it impolite. I don't mind if someone comes in here and says, I hate white people. I don't mind if they say that as long as they say it politely. That's the kind of free thinking we have here, is that everyone's allowed to say everything as long as it's said politely. And I did really try hard to look at the other side, Simone, when I did the presentation, but I couldn't see any defense of what Trump has done. And so I was hoping you were going to present some defense of what Trump has done, maybe take issue with some of my facts or something like that. I would love to hear that.
Hey, Garrett, if I didn't have 104 fever, and if I wasn't puking my guts up, I
I'm
probably
sorry.
would have gotten my act together enough to pull up some
Let's
data
do
for you.
let's do another
Another
event, and
time.
we'll have you present on the defense of Trump. Can we
Sorry,
do
I
that
cannot
when you
speak.
feel better? But please,
Yes,
try
yes.
to take some Tylenol or a shower or something like that to get your temperature down. If you're that high, you need to get down. So, Kaleem, go ahead.
Hey, thank you. Um, so just a couple of things. Firstly, just quickly on DEI because it seems to be kind of frustrating a lot of people. In theory, what you're saying, Garrett, is right. Obviously, DEI was meant to be a good thing. It was meant to be inclusive, reach out to populations that were hitherto not included, right? But in practice, it has been discriminatory. I mean, in practice, and I'm telling you that I've worked in tech for the last 20 years. Asians, East Asians, South Asians are overrepresented, and there was a correction. There has been a correction that I've seen in the last, I'd say, 6, 7 years. Okay, and this has also happened in academia. Okay, so people trying to get into university. So again, I'm just talking about in practice how aggressively it was implemented. And in fact, I've seen, people at high levels, executive levels, saying we have to hire women of color, Latinos, etc., and not look at. I mean, just blatantly say this over the last few years. So there's gonna be a pushback, right? So again, the theory is right. How it's been implemented, on a corporate level at least, it has been quite disturbing. The other thing that I wanted to bring
We're
up.
over a minute. Sorry, we're trying to keep it to a minute. We're well over a minute. I'm
We
sorry.
only have
Okay.
2 minutes left, and we have a bunch of hands up. So, and you can only mention
sure.
one topic per time that you raise your hand. So,
Okay.
Kaleem, the
So
percentage of tech people, like, is the same as it is. So, when you say that there's a change in representation, you only have so many qualified tech people in general. So, are you saying that now there are a lot of or that prior to there were a lot of unemployed white people, and now there are a lot of employed
No, I'm
white people
saying
in tech?
that there has been an attempt to correct the overrepresentation, particularly of Asians. That's what I've seen, right, in policies, and that was that. So just quickly on the last point, I did want to mention one thing to look at is the rise in white supremacy in the first and second terms of Trump. Now, it's interesting that how the shift has happened because we've had more minorities vote for Trump this time around.
Yeah,
But the first time
Kaleem,
around,
I want to limit you to one topic because we have a bunch of hands up and we're going to close out in 1 minute.
okay, I just wanted to mention that's
Yeah,
something to
no, I
look at
appreciate it.
is
So
the
32%
representation.
of Asians, at least in software development, 32% of software developers are Asian. So when you
Yeah.
say an increase in representation, if you could try to post a source that says that, the representation has not been like that industry has not been representative of the qualified workers
Yeah.
by race, go ahead and post a source for that. I would love to see
Sure.
it. I've also been in tech probably for 30 years now, if I'm honest. I was a software developer in the 90s, so I haven't seen what you've seen, and so I would love an objective source that validates what you're saying. Less than 30 seconds, Chris, if you could.
All right. Yeah. I'm put on the spot here.
Sorry.
Yeah, I actually agree with the last comment. I think that there were there have been a lot of left-wing overreaches. DEI kind of was one of them, even if it had good intentions. But the issue really now is, and I was actually pretty frustrated with that kind of decade span from like 2015 to 2022, 23 something. But now, I mean, Trump very clearly has kind of dictator habits, is attacking science, is attacking journalism, is attacking, he's kind of like the bully that, will attack Canada and Panama and Mexico, although he'll give in to Putin. I would say incompetent, also a traitor. I think very clearly I agree with some comments that there are some other actors at play than just Trump who, I think he would be a dictator if he were given that power. But he also has the vocabulary of like 15 words and is very easily manipulated. And if I was a KGB agent, I don't think you could hand them someone easier to manipulate than the current president. So, all right, I'll stop there because.
Thanks.
Great, thanks. Appreciate that. Joshua, go ahead.
Sir, thank you. If I may just offer a quick perspective on from the military, on the culture in the military, and offer some hope. It's that the members of the military who are making decisions for what they will do and follow are men who have dedicated their lives and are brilliant men. You don't get to the rank of colonel or general without being extremely intelligent and a philosopher. And those men are very aware of the long history of the military to stay staunchly apolitical. So they will not go lightly along with aggression against fellow U.S. citizens and degrading the Constitution. However, if your hope is that they'll rise up and oppose Trump, that is also something that we will not do. It is not for us to be the movers and the enforcers in that regard. We are very proud of our apolitical. It is one of the unique things of American military that makes us unlike other countries where you have those coups. So I just wanted to offer that perspective.
Joshua, what if Trump orders the military to, get rid of political opposition, or orders the CIA to get rid of political opposition and tells the military that we're not going to have another election.
It, I agree. It is a legitimate concern, but I don't know what you would think the military would do in that situation.
I would
I,
say
I,
remove
I
Trump from
would not.
office. Very simple. Say no,
It,
we will not go along
there,
with it. And it was already done, but quite frankly, but it was done by, I forget the name of the man in the military that prevented Trump from putting in the Insurrection Act when he claimed the election was stolen. But that person is no longer a member of the military. And
Miley.
thank you. So, will the current leadership of the military do the same thing and say, no, you can't just claim the Insurrection Act in order to not be removed from power? Because that's what dictators do, by the way. They don't say, I'm just going to be a dictator. They claim martial law and they retain martial law for the rest of their lives and even beyond their lives, where the people that they've given the torch to continued under martial law for decades or even longer. So I expect the military
I
to not allow
understand.
that to happen.
You will not. It's very difficult if you're expecting a direct coup from military members, as opposed to military members refusing to follow an order that they believe violates the Constitution. So if you want the military to stand up against Trump, I don't know that you can hope for that. But if you're
Oh,
hoping
I
for
can
them to
hope for
sit
it, and I
down
will, Joshua. I'll pray for it too.
in order
And
for that,
I'm going to. You can't stop me. I'm going to. And
You
I
can
think
only
that,
hope. You can only hope. But
I mean, it's
but
all we
I
have.
think Joshua is right. I mean, they by law and pride, they have to agree with the commander in chief. That's
Well,
right.
no, they
So
don't have to, right? If the commander in chief says he's not going to follow the Constitution, the military takes an oath to the Constitution, not to the president.
really,
Yeah.
There are precedents. There are three precedents in 1812 in World War I and World War II where the Insurrection Act was applied. It was applied, for instance, in World War II in the incarceration of Japanese Americans en masse by the hundreds of thousands. And the entire nation, oh, not the entire nation, but vast numbers of Americans went along with this during the war fever, because the war was essentially, initiated with Pearl Harbor. So you had this. He's doing the same to all asylum seekers, refugees, migrants, immigrants, legal or illegal, and even Americans that have birthright citizenship. He is othering them to the point that he is dehumanizing them, and thus he can send, for instance, Venezuelans, against whom he has no evidence of their gang activity whatsoever, off to prisons in El
Victor,
Salvador,
I
where
want to,
they have like 1/10 of the rights that they have in the
Victor,
worst
I want to let
American.
Nancy go, and it's past my bedtime. I got to put my kids to bed. So, Nancy, quickly, if you don't mind.
Okay. You know what? Here's some light to the entire situation. People are rising up. Okay. There are tours that are going on. Bernie Sanders, it's surpassing stadium capacity. Town halls that are occurring where in the red states, Republican people that are Republicans are showing up. They're not happy. They're not happy with Trump. They're not happy with what's going on. And what's happening is their representatives, their red state representative and Republicans aren't showing up. Okay, they're afraid to show up. So we have a lot, and then April 5th is a national day where basically there's going to be huge marches all over the country. So yes, people are marching up, and I think that it's reached not even to the massive point that it will reach, okay, when more of his draconian measures are basically enforced. So let's not give up or not see that the people are rising. There are more of us than them, and there are several people that regret having voted for Trump as well.
yeah,
Yeah,
good
thank you,
point.
Nancy. I appreciate you giving hope, and we need that right now, and I think we all need to rise up and say, you know, again, I'm not telling people don't support Trump, but I'm saying don't support these things that Trump is doing.
But
And
even
so,
on an international basis, Garrett, look what's happening with Tesla. People are blowing up Tesla dealerships and cars and things like that. So we have people internationally that are supporting our efforts against this administration.
Thank you, Nancy. Thank you.
Yeah.
yeah, appreciate that, Nancy. And it's good to hear that. I'm not watching the news every day. I do research for these events, but I'm not watching the news every day. I just don't have time given my work schedule.
You'll find this on the internet, some with mainstream media, but it's all over the internet. And
Good.
the crowds are huge. They're
Good.
showing up.
That's great to hear. Bill, really quick, less than 20 seconds, please. I gotta get these kids to sleep.
Yeah, we're talking about military, but these things usually begin not with the Army, Navy, Air Force, with National Guard, because there's more control and they can be used in what's considered an internal way. And they are less likely, I believe, to uphold the oaths that were mentioned earlier. That's all I'm saying. This National Guard stuff can be quite intimidating.
Interesting. Thanks for sharing, Bill. So I just want to thank everybody for coming tonight for the diverse opinions. I want to especially thank the Trump supporters for speaking up. While I didn't hear any issues with the facts that I brought to bear, I did hear differing opinions, and that's important that we have differing opinions in the FTI. And I really feel bad that Simone didn't feel safe, but I also didn't understand why she didn't feel safe, other than that a majority of people didn't agree with her. And for that, I'll say Trump supporters, bring more people to the FTI events, because we do want to hear their voices, your voices. It's important we have diverse perspectives, and it's important that everybody feel comfortable speaking. I did try hard to try to channel a pro-Trump perspective with the facts that I was aware of, and I just couldn't come up with anything. I gave the best that I could in the presentation, but I couldn't see any defense for what I saw. And I thought the story that I explained tonight is pretty concerning and alarming, and I think we need to be concerned and alarmed by it. I very much would love to hear that that's not the case and that I don't have to worry. But I like to say, don't stress, just do your best and accept the rest, and keep your hopes high and your disappointment low. And I'm going to leave you all with those two sayings, and let's do what we can to make the world a better place. And thank you all, and have a great night. And I hope
Thank
we'll see you
you.
next week.
Thank you, Garrett. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.
Right.